Business Lessons from the Military. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about military doctrine, um, military history, the practices of great military leaders, and see what lessons we can distill from them in order to apply them to our business lives, or improve our success in our professions, in the companies we run, etc. So earlier this morning, I was in a meeting of a group to which I belong. It's a group of military veterans, and was telling them a little bit about this show, and they really love the idea because there is so much that we learn in the military that can be applied to the civilian world, and yet somehow it doesn't seem to get out there. A lot of the podcasts done by veterans are about how to help veterans. They're sort of inward looking, and our intention is to be outward looking to create some connections between military veterans and even people still in the armed forces and our fellow citizens in the civilian world. So my topic for today is speak truth to power. Now, the idea for this stemmed from an incident early in my career when I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. So as probably most of you know, was a chaplain in the U.S. Navy, and the Navy provides chaplains both to the Navy and the Marine Corps, as well as the Merchant Marine Academy and the Coast Guard. And I was I was also at that time, in addition to just being a chaplain, I was the brig chaplain. The brig is the Navy and Marine Corps term for jail. And as part of my work as the brig chaplain, I looked for ways to make the time that it was almost all young men in the brig were spending, make it more beneficial for them. And so one of the things I was looking at doing was creating a college program so that while they were in the brig, they could take some classes that would give them credit toward earning an AA or even a BA, a bachelor's degree, after they got out of the brig and or the Marine Corps. And I was so in the military, it's not unusual to have a situation where you have what are called what are two chains of command. So a chain of command is to whom you report. So in the chaplain corps, we oftentimes have an operational chain of command and a separate administrative chain of command. So, and that was the case in Okinawa. Our operational chain of command started with the chief of chaplains. I'm sorry, not the chief of chaplains. The base chaplain for Marine Corps bases. For Marine Corps base Smedley D. Butler, and it kind of worked its way down through the deputy base chaplain, and then in my case to me. Our administrative, and that was all. The operational chain of command was about the work that we did, the conducting of services, the visiting of workspaces, the providing counseling services, helping with various types of celebrations, etc. Our administrative chain of command worked through what was called Headquarters and Services Battalion. And the administrative side dealt with things like our pay, insurance benefits we might get, and all of the sort of routine functions of military life that don't involve the actual work that you do. And our the in Okinawa, the headquarters and services battalion is headed up by a full bird colonel, and I'm not going to mention his name, although I do highly esteem this individual. And the reason I'm not going to mention his name is I can't remember it now. But in any event, when I came up with this program to do college credit for the brig, I got a call from the headquarters and services battalion commander's office saying he wanted to meet with me. Now, this was pretty unusual because, in general, there was no reason for me to meet with the colonel of the battalion. Um, you know, the routine administrative things that I needed done or that had to be done on my behalf certainly were not, handled by him by any stretch of the imagination. And so, you know, previous to that, the only time I had an interaction with him was when I was asked to go with one of his senior enlisted Marines to make what's called a Keiko call. It was to notify the wife of a Marine that he had been killed. So, I showed up at his office, and to my surprise, he was very upset about plans that I was making with the brig officer, that's the officer in charge of the brig, to create this college training program or this college class program. And his essential argument was that these Marines had disgraced, the Marines in the brig had disgraced the Marine Corps. They had, misbehaved, to put it lightly, and that they weren't there to be entertained or coddled. Rather, they should be, treated as harshly as possible within the strictures of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and be given as little consideration as possible. And so, certainly, advancing their educational goals was not something that he thought was appropriate. And we hadn't had a lot of interaction at that point. Like I said, I had dealt with him on the Keiko call. I had made what's known as a courtesy call on him when he first came to the battalion, which kind of surprised him because it was a practice that wasn't really done any longer. And just as an aside, it was something that my father and mother used to tell me about, because when my dad was in the military back in the 50s and 60s, making courtesy calls on a new commanding officer was de rigueur. It's what you did as a junior officer, especially. And so I thought, well, there was a new colonel in charge of the battalion, and so it was my duty to go and present myself to him and to, in essence, get his instructions. And so I made an appointment to see him. And when I walked into his office, he said, "So why are you here, Chaplain?" And I said, "Well, sir, it's my obligation to pay a duty call on you, or a courtesy call. And so I'm here to do that and to get your perspective on what you want to see done by the chaplains within your command. And other than that, I'm here to listen." I think that he saw me as someone who respected military tradition, who wanted to accord him respect, but nonetheless, a little bit quirky there, right? And so, but it was an interesting meeting, and as I reflect back on that time, I was very glad that I did that, given how things turned out. So now here I am, a number of months later in his office, and he's basically calling me to the carpet for wanting to establish this program. Now, I didn't say this to him, but unfortunately for him, he did not have the authority to prevent me from starting that program. And the reality was, the brig officer was not in his chain of command. And well, I don't want to say that. The brig officer had the authority to override decisions regarding what happened at the brig. And he liked the program. or he liked the idea of the program because it gave these detainees and prisoners something to do so they wouldn't get into mischief. And so the program was instituted. But nonetheless, when a Marine Corps colonel expresses distaste for a program, you listen. And I certainly did listen. I heard him out. And then I said to him the following, and that is, with due respect, sir, I have a different perspective, and perhaps this is something that you may not have considered. And I said, when these young Marines get out of the brig, most of them are also going to be kicked out of the Marine Corps. That typically was the case. And I said, so they're going to go back to the civilian world. And they were, and I said, while we may know about their record of spending time in the brig, and I certainly join you in your condemnation of the behavior that they did that warranted brig time. Our fellow citizens back in the States are just going to see them as members of the Marine Corps or former members of the Marine Corps. That's all they're going to see them as. And so if we set them up for failure, what we're setting them up for is to give a black eye to the Marine Corps. On the other hand, if we set them up for success, despite the time they spent in the brig, then we are setting them up to at least not blacken the eye of the Marine Corps, if not, put it in a good light with respect to our other citizens. And I think so. I said, I think for that reason alone, it makes sense to help these Marines make some kind of decent transition out of the Marine Corps and back into civilian life. And he argued the point, and we left essentially agreeing to disagree. I'm sure he knew that the program was instituted. I'm sure he also knew that, he didn't order me not to do it. He didn't have the authority to do that because he was not in my operational chain of command. But he spoke his piece, and I spoke mine respectfully. And here's the upshot of the story. So about a year and a half later, my time in Okinawa was up. I was getting ready to, my family and I were getting ready to leave the island and come back to the United States for our next job in California. And as was traditional, I was being given what's called an end of tour award. Now, I jokingly call it a gold star for showing up every day, but in point of fact, in this particular case, and sometimes having worked 80 plus hours a week after week, I think I really did earn that award. And so they have what's called a formation, which is when basically all of your colleagues stand in ranks like you see, in the movies, and you're called front and center, and you're given the award, and the award is read. So there's a write-up that's done on the certificate for the award that explains why you're being given this award. And to my surprise, because this hadn't happened before for a chaplain, this colonel showed up to give me the award. It was Chaplain Bemmel, front and center. I come marching up, I stand at attention, and the citation is read. The presenter doesn't read the citation, someone else does. In fact, my mentor read it. And then he clipped the award onto my uniform. And then he said, I think probably the highest praise I ever received in the military, and that was that not only was I a good chaplain, but I was also a good officer because I was willing to speak truth to power, and that he deeply respected that, even if he disagreed with what I was saying. And I found out later that, in fact, he had specifically asked to be able to present the award to me because he wanted to make that remark. And I will say parenthetically, there was a point in time when I did serve on his staff for a short time, and so I was at his staff meetings, and it was interesting to watch him interact with the other mostly junior officers on his staff, the ones that sort of knuckled under to him. You could see there was a certain lack of respect on his part for them. He didn't want people to. He didn't want yes men around. He wanted people who would speak their minds respectfully, so that then he could have the best advice, the best information for making the decisions that he needed to make. And so, in talking to my mentor about the whole situation afterwards, when he told me that the colonel had specifically asked to be able to present the award to me, I will tell you that, as I said, it was the most memorable thing, that the commendation that I received while I was in the military. And so the reason I bring this story up is not to say, oh, what a great guy Kevin is. I mean, believe me, I certainly I have my faults. I made my mistakes in the military, as do everybody. I think that it's a difficult thing to do, to candidly speak our minds to someone who has authority over us. Now, in point of fact, he couldn't literally have fired me, although he certainly could have complained to the base chaplain about me if he thought I was disrespectful, or if I had in some way, transgressed my position, and that could very well have meant that I would get a negative fitness report, and in fact my career would have essentially been over at that point. And so, but he did not, and I think there's a couple reasons why, and one of them is something we can control, and another is something that we really can't control. So what we can control is the way that we present potentially difficult information to a superior. So to give another small example, when I was assigned to the Carrier Air Wing 14, CAG 14, my commanding officer there was a Navy captain. And we were fortunate to have a good relationship based on mutual respect. Nonetheless, there were times when I felt that I needed to say things to him that I wasn't exactly sure he wanted to hear or would hear. And so the way I would serve it up in his case was I would come in his office, or I would come to the door of his office, knock, and wait to be acknowledged. And I could usually tell his mood, because if he said, "Yes, Rabbi," I knew he was, in essence, glad to see me. And if he said, "What can I do for you, chaplain?" it meant he was busy, and I might be, annoying him. But I would always say the same thing: "Sir, there's something I'd like to speak with you about, and if now is not a good time, if you wouldn't mind letting me know when it would be a better time, I'd be happy to come back." And almost always he would motion me in, and I would say, "Is it all right for me to close the door, sir?" Because when I was going to have a difficult conversation with my superior, I certainly didn't want people walking by in the passageway and overhearing anything. So he would always say yes. So it's within our control, first of all, to choose the place and the time that we speak truth to power, and to do so as wisely as possible. And then the second thing is, I would always start out when I had something that I thought might be, difficult for him to hear. I would always start it out the same way. I'd say, "Sir, there's something I'd like to speak with you about, and I may be out of line in doing so. And if so, I ask you, sir, to please turn me around, kick me on the backside out of your office." And he would always, the first time I said it, he chuckled, and after a few times, he recognized that this was my way of acknowledging to him that what I was about to say could be interpreted as being disrespectful, but it was not meant with disrespect. That in fact, I was doing this because I was concerned about him, both as a leader and an officer, and also as a human being. And so then I would kind of lay it on him, and to his credit, he listened with an open mind, always. Didn't always agree with me, which is fine. I was a big boy then. I'm a big boy now. People don't have to agree with me. Then we can disagree. I hopefully will disagree respectfully, and that was always the case. And so the second part of the first thing where we have control is we also have control about how we present things to people. So there's been this tendency over the last I think couple of decades at least to speak the truth as if merely saying something that's true means that people have to listen to it. And I would argue that is incorrect and manifestly unwise. So we may be saying something that's perfectly true, but if we say it in a way that that offends people or that pushes them away from us, then we are unlikely, they're unlikely to really hear what we're saying, and to hear it in a spirit of seeking to gain mutual benefit. So that's something we control. And the other part of how we present ideas or comments, even criticism to people, is to present it in a way where they see that they have a compelling reason in order to listen to what we're saying. So going back to the example of the Marine Corps colonel, I could have focused purely on the benefit for these Marines, but clearly he was not going to hear that. It was absolutely true. It was for their benefit. It would also benefit the brig officer and the guards at the brig, because it would make their jobs easier, because the prisoners would have something productive to engage them, and that's a good thing. And he might have been open to hearing that, but knowing him, knowing a little bit about him, and Marines in general have a very deep and abiding affection for the Marine Corps itself. How the Marine Corps was viewed was of importance to him. And it turned out, I would say, great importance to him. And so by approaching him from the standpoint of how something he cared about would benefit, i.e., how the Marine Corps in total would benefit, I think that helped him hear better where I was coming from, and that even if he in the end didn't agree with what I was recommending, nonetheless he could appreciate what my motives were, and that our motives were aligned, even if our methods were not. And I think that that's an important thing to recognize. So we, in point of fact, although, like I said, he did not agree with what he viewed as coddling these prisoners, he certainly agreed with maintaining the image of the Marine Corps among our fellow citizens. And so he saw that like I said, in the bigger picture, we were aligned, and so that my doing this was at least in part something he could embrace, at least philosophically. So you could say, well, God, that's sales, that's diplomacy. Yeah, it is. For sure it is. And if we are going to speak truth to power, then I think we should do so intelligently, and we should show them that they have a stake in listening to what we have to say with an open mind, and hopefully agreeing to what we're saying or agreeing to what we're recommending. So all of those are potentially within our ability to impact, to create the scenario, the time, the place, to present it in a way that's most likely to be heard. Now, the part that we don't have control over is whether the person we're speaking to has the leadership qualities and character that will keep them open minded no matter how we present it. So, look, there are some people who you can just fire the truth at them, and they have an open mind and they will listen to it even if they feel, potentially personally attacked by it. So my friend Michael is like that. While I don't fire things at him like that, I know from conversations we've had that even when people say things to him that in a rude way, he does his best to parse through it and nonetheless entertain what he thinks is the point that the person is trying to make. And it's a tremendous ability on his part, and not one, frankly, that I think a lot of us have. I will admit that if someone fires at me with the 16-inch guns, as I call them, I really struggle to overcome the feeling that I've been attacked, and really be able to listen to what they have to say. But and so and there are some people who they are so egocentric, they don't care even if you are explaining something and showing them that it's to their benefit to listen. They will not, because it's their way or the highway. And in that case, there isn't anything we can do, right? And by the way, I've dealt with both types of leaders. I will say, in the Marine Corps, most of the leaders were the open-minded kind, generally speaking, principled. That is part of the Marine Corps ethos. But the worst officers I dealt with, one was a Navy captain and the other was a Navy admiral. Both of them extraordinarily closed-minded, very, very full of themselves. And they were not at all open to hearing something that differed with their view. They preferred to pontificate, and if you didn't go along with what they were pontificating, then you were a dirtbag. You were, all those horrible things. And in one case with the admiral, I was nonetheless able to navigate that situation well, and was lauded by my colleagues, fortunately, because I wasn't the only one who saw that this admiral really was undeserving of his star. And with the case of the Navy captain, was frankly defeated by him, because he had enough sycophants around him that he was able to insulate himself, and may his name live in infamy, as we say. So, I think there's essentially a one-to-one correlation in bringing this into our civilian lives. So there are people in our business lives, our professional lives. They are open to criticism. They are open to our recommendations, our thoughts. They'll listen to us. And we may have to present it somewhat diplomatically in order to help them keep an open mind. And if we choose our place and time carefully, then indeed, we can create that situation where we can speak truth to power with little, if any, risk to our careers, our professional advancement, our businesses. And hopefully those are the kind of people that we get to work with. Now, if we have to work with someone who is not open, hopefully we figure that out pretty quickly without damage to our career prospects, i.e., making a recommendation to them that they spurn and take offense at because we've had the temerity to challenge their omnipotence. And what do we do in that case where we have this egotistical superior, who does not want truth spoken to him, and quite to the contrary, he wants to be surrounded by yes men. And look, I think there's really only two choices, right? We can tolerate the person and just recognize that they don't want us to do our best work for them, and unfortunately they will, well, not unfortunately, they will suffer for that. Unfortunately, we will too, because we can't do our best work openly and above board, and make the best effort on behalf of our team. um, and the other thing we can do is, hopefully find someone else to work for. Maybe we can get some sort of lateral or upward move in our organization to get out from under that person, into to get under the supervision of someone who is open to our ideas, or leave the company and find a position somewhere else. Now, if it's our own business, it really is incumbent on us to listen and to create the kind of atmosphere where our people, our staff, our team members will speak truth to us. Okay, and that is critical. I would say that it is, if not the most important aspect of good leadership, it is certainly among the very top. So if we put it up there with acting with integrity, and excuse me, I think those are, probably the two most important qualities in a leader that we can have, because people want to follow someone who acts with integrity, but they also want to follow someone who they feel has respect for them. And part of respecting people is allowing them to speak truth to power, which means speaking truth to their superiors. Now, do we have to suffer their rudeness or disrespect on their part? No, I don't think we have to or should, in fact. And if someone treats us rudely, then I think, calmly, we need to help them redirect how they behave, and explain to them that while you appreciate them, bringing this idea to your attention, or bringing this matter to your attention, you would appreciate it if in the future they handle themselves in a more respectful way, and to say it, just that calmly. So, again, in the civilian world, um, where we don't have as formal chains of command, nonetheless, it works very much the way it works in the military. And so, we have to gauge, is our supervisor, our superior, someone who is open to hearing the truth? And if not, then what are we going to do about it? Are we going to sort of suffer our fate in silence, with the attendant probably attenuation of our career prospects? Or are we going to look for some way around this impediment so that we can go on to greater success, with working with someone who has an appreciation for what we bring to the table? So, speaking truth to power, I think it's a skill we need to develop, and it's constantly challenged, and of course, the higher up we go in the hierarchy, it should become easier for us to do this, but oftentimes doesn't. Ego is part of what drives people to succeed, and oftentimes the most senior people in an organization have the biggest egos, and oftentimes, look, it's fine to have a big ego as long as it is married to humility, so that the ego doesn't get in the way of doing what's right, and being open to suggestions and criticism. But unfortunately, that is sometimes not the case. And so then we need to deal with it appropriately. So I thank you very much for joining me today. Would love to hear your comments on this topic. Maybe share an experience you've had where you were successful or unsuccessful in speaking truth to power. These anecdotes, I think, can be valuable as each of us decide how we will use this particular tool in our toolbox. So you can post on social media. The links will be in the show notes after this episode posts. Or if it's something that you don't want public, you can always send me an email. My email address is in the show notes as well. And I would love to hear your thoughts. So that's the show for today. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, People Making Money. And our topic is networking to get a job. So there was an article in the weekend edition of the Wall Street Journal, and it magically had discovered that networking is back as the way to get a job. Sometimes I am astonished by the foolishness of what I read in what is, after all, one of the top newspapers in the world. And the Wall Street Journal has the largest circulation of any newspaper in the United States. And so I do want to talk about that, talk about some of the issues that are raised in the article, and dig into this topic of what really is the way to find a job. So please join me tomorrow, again, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then next week on Monday at 10 a.m. is my show, Trust and Estates Weekly. And then a week from today, also at 10 a.m., all Pacific time, is the next edition of Business Lessons from the Military. So one last thing before I go. If you're not a subscriber to the show, please do consider doing so. You can just click on the subscribe button right below the video on YouTube, and that way you'll get notified every time a new show posts or a new feed goes live, and you'll never miss another episode. So again, thank you for joining me, and hoping to see you tomorrow. And signing off as I always do, Marie, you are my bell. All the